So, I bring this into a bit closer to my mouth for a change, because I want to pay tribute to... Oh, there's another thing, which we'll get to, which came up over the last week. But I actually want to do a proper sort of little tribute to Evolution Studios, because pretty much ever since they've been out, I've been a fan of their games. Most of the details that I'm getting in terms of the history of the company is off the Wikipedia, so it's probably reliable, but I don't know. But they founded themselves in '99. Basically, they sort of got lost in the shuffle. The company, they got founded because the publisher that they were working with, the little studio, Ocean Software, who's done games for years, ever since the 80s here in the UK. They got purchased by Infogrames, which is technically now Atari, I think, still, because Atari bought them, and I think it's complicated because Atari sort of does still exist, but it's nowhere near what it was, obviously, back in the day. This was in the days of when, I think it was Driver 3, and a few other games came under the Atari banner. Either way, so Evolution Studios was formed in '99, and they began doing a car racing demo, basically for a PC engine, with rally cars on some sort of a circuit. Sort of, I guess, what became of the multiplayer version of Colin McRae Rally 2. That sort of style. I guess because of that, Sony picked them up. And Sony were interested in Evolution Studios to do a game for them, because they had acquired the license for at least, I think it was like 2 or 3 years, to be the only platform where you can get a game based on the license of the World Rally Championship, which is, the pinnacle of rally car driving. If you want to be a name in the rallying industry, you try and win the World Rally Championship. It's sort of given in the name. So 2001 came along, and it was sort of incredible, because at the time, considering this was 2001, this is only a year or so after the release of the console. In fact, pretty much, I'd say somewhere accurately, not a year on exactly, but close to a year on, because the UK, or the European release, was November 2001. It did come out in March in the rest of the world. But it did accurately have all the roster names, although they obviously couldn't get the rights to Colin McRae at the time, because Colin McRae had his own video game series, so he had to go under a different name. But in essence, he was in the game. It's just his likeness and his name obviously wasn't, due to the other game series, Colin McRae Rally, which I've already spoken my fandom of. But, it was really top notch. The graphics, considering this is the first one to come on PS2, because The third Colin McRae Rally game didn't come out until 2002. I'm not entirely sure when in the year, but this was the first one on next-gen consoles as it was at the time. And for what was presented at the time, it was beautiful. The cars looked great. The scenery actually looked pretty exceptional. And the variety of locales that they managed to program in, where you've got the snowy areas of Sweden and Monte Carlo. If you're wondering why there was snow in Monte Carlo, it's because the race is traditionally done in January, and January it's normally where they have the race. It's normally snowy, but they had that. But then you had the sun-beached, sunset, sun and sand of like Greece and Cyprus and Argentina, and even there was a valley. There was a safari rally, as they called it, which was basically Kenya, but they didn't call it the Kenya rally. They always called it the safari rally. I don't know. And then going into sort of the dirt and the dankness of Rally GB, because the British one always was in November, which is when there'd been a lot of rain, so you get a lot of mud, and weirdly it just got right. It was just bang on. The other thing that was good compared to what you got with some of the previous Colin McRae Rally games and V Rally games at the time is that some of the stages were short. Now, obviously, they couldn't accurately put the stages in exactly because people wouldn't want to drive for 20 minutes. Deal. But the one aspect that I did like is that sometimes the stages, they weren't sort of uniform, sort of this sort of gap. They weren't like 4 minutes. Some would stretch out to 6. Some would actually be shorter. They'd be sort of only 3. But you got a handful of stages on each one. But then the real nice bit came with the replay mode afterwards, which, again, Colin McRae 1 and 2 had. But not only because it was next gen, but the variety of the things. You could basically have like a helicopter angle, as if it was like the actual coverage. Because the coverage that has been done of the World Rally, and there's always sort of a helicopter filming the action and flying above sort of thing, to get that sort of angle, and to actually have that in the game, and various cockpit angles and everything. It was really good, and pretty much everybody gave it positive reviews. I think it's got like it's had about an 80 or so on the Metacritic or average rankings. And then, even more surprisingly, Famitsu, which is Japan, which is normally very sort of down to earth and sort of on your balls sort of thing, in terms of review scores, they gave it a 35 out of 40. Which means if you take into account that the 4 categories are out of 10 each, that means, in theory, there were 3 9s and an 8. If you're looking at that, that's a pretty solid game. And the fact of the matter is, with just having a look here with the series, because the series weirdly was annualized. You had 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I believe it was called Rally Evolved, which was the final one. But over the course of time, and because they got, I mean, I'm looking at the average review scores here, and they only go between 79 and like 82 if you look at the game rankings figures for each. That's pretty consistent if you can get within that 80% region. You know, they were pretty solid. And then, when they moved to next gen in PS3, they launched another series, which this time was an actual launch title. And that was MotorStorm. MotorStorm was... Weirdly, it was... Some would say... I would say it was inspired by an original launch title for the PS2. There was a racing sort of rally game where you could have different sort of vehicles. They didn't all have to be the same. That went by the name of Wild Wild Racing. And I think it was a launch title. The only reason I say I think it is because on my original PS2 model, which ceased to function, I still have the original demo disc that came with the brand new blue box PS2, which had demos for FIFA. I think it had... No, it wouldn't have been Wipeout. FIFA, Fantavision, I think. But certainly... Well, no, I remember FIFA. There was something else which I can't think of at the time. But then there was also Wild Wild Racing. And in essence, MotorStorm was basically taking some of the ideas from Wild Wild Racing, but incorporating it into Evolution Studios' track record of knowing how to do racing/rally games. And therefore, once again, you had a series of 3 pretty solid games in MotorStorm, MotorStorm Pacific Rift, and MotorStorm Apocalypse. Keep in mind, both these series were so strong that WRC had a PS1 game spun off to another studio, but it went last gen with WRC Arcade, which is actually an underrated game. It's a really sort of fun arcade style racer, sort of like Sega Rally back in the day. And with MotorStorm, again, it went to PS2 with, I think it was called Arctic Edge. Yeah, Arctic Edge, which wasn't developed by Evolution. It was developed by sort of their sister studio, Big Studios. The reason why I say sister is the term given here is satellite studios, but both of them were acquired in 2007 after the success of MotorStorm by Sony outright. And they even did a somewhat well-received Vita game, which was sort of another spin-off of the MotorStorm thing, MotorStorm RC, where it was basically sort of the MotorStorm franchise meets Micro Machines or RC cars. Just really good. And then the problem is the problem is they are arguably the very first victim of the PS4, because the big game that everybody was interested in 2013 when they showed it off from Evolution Studios, you know, this studio that has a lot of history, was a little game called Drive Club. And by little, I mean this was supposed to be huge. Yeah, it was going to be coming out at launch. It was going to be available free to people with PlayStation Plus. like a limited version would be free on PlayStation Plus. And, you know, it was going to offer everything. It was going to be sort of the right atmosphere. You know, it was going to be sort of top notch. Of course, the issue is that that never happened. Because we got to October 2013. And basically, they said it wouldn't be ready. Until early 2014. And then, when we got to early 2014, they then said it isn't coming until October. So, not exactly a year on from its original release date, and when it was demoed at games conventions, you know, the original build from 2013 was different to the one that came out in 2014. There were tweaks here and there, but in essence, the game looked the same and played the same. And the big thing was, they knew there was demand for it. You know, they sort of had a gauge of how much demand there was for it. That's what I'm trying to say. So then when it came to October 2014, the fact that it suffered online issues from launch, when they were stressing that this is going to be an online-centric game, where you're going to be, you know, competing against your friends sort of thing. Which in essence is the same thing that Need for Speed did with its reboot a few months back. They had issues. The dynamic weather, where weather could change in the middle of the race. That patch didn't come until like December of 2014. Then updates did come. We had new tracks and cars in January. And I think there was an add-on. I can't remember. Yeah, here we go. Just having a look at it. Drive Club Bikes, which basically added sort of bike stuff, and it actually changed the game. Because obviously the physics and mechanics for a car racing game is different to a bike racing game. And you know, that came out October last year, so pretty much a year on from the original. And, you know, at the time, it really didn't get that good reviews. It's got an average of like 71. But of course, all those reviews are of at the time. And at the time, it was a debacle because it wasn't working properly. The thing is, if you look at the game now, it really is a very strong racing game. Okay, it's took a while to come out, and it wasn't perfect at instantaneous release. But then again, if you think about it, there was a lot of problems with Fallout 4 at launch. There was a lot of problems with Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. There was a lot of problems with that at launch, but the Game of the Year editions, which okay hasn't happened for Fallout 4, but with the Batman situation, when the Game of the Year editions came out like a year later, it really sort of was a full-fledged game. And obviously, if you take into account the whole bikes thing, it really felt like a rounded package. But with all the issues that it's had, Sony just decided to shut them down. which is interesting considering that the review, well, the Gran Turismo games haven't come out as often. Okay, they've been widely received, but the fact that you obviously had Gran Turismo 6 come out on PS3 when everybody felt it should have been a PS4 launch game. I guess it was just because, well, they did 2 games on the PS1, 2 on the PS2, so they had to do 2 on the PS3. Because nobody really paid attention to Gran Turismo 6. They paid attention to 1 and 2 because they were good games. They paid attention to 3 because it was a launch game. They paid attention to 4 because it was uber in scale. They paid attention to 5 because it was the first on PS3. But because 6 came out pretty much at the same time as the PS4 coming out, most people don't remember there's a GT6. And of course, now that they're trying to go Gran Turismo VR and Gran Turismo 7, you know, you're not going to remember any of that, which is a shame. And the fact that the PlayStation Plus edition that came out in June of 2015 got removed from availability as early as October of 2015, before the bikes thing came in. Yeah. It's a sad situation that they fell in, really. Because basically 12 months ago, they cut a lot of people from the staff, apparently because they wanted to develop Drive Club as a service. Video games are not services, Sony. Just saying. Just saying. And then, of course, they shut it down. Pretty much this time last week, 22nd of March. And it's a shame to see them go. I really hope the guys who have been there, through all its various iterations over the last 15 years, since, WRC 1 came out, I hope they go on to bigger, brighter, better things. But yeah. God bless Evolution Studios. Your games were a lot of fun. And it was just because of what Sony wanted when you actually got acquired by them outright that suddenly you realise the problem with big corporations. Sadly, that's the way the cookie crumbles in most cases. I mean, look at Lionhead that shut down a few weeks ago with a game that was supposedly nearly finished in development. Okay, it might have been crap, but that game, is dead, like most things. All these small game studios that get bought by big publishers or big studios and then get tossed away like chaff because they aren't the in thing. They need to go to somebody else. We'll have to see what other studios now get shut down in the next 2 or 3 years that did legendary stuff like Evolution did. Either way, quick thing I also wanted to talk about, the DS3 cock-up. So, Bandai Namco, the publishers of Dark Souls 3 in the Western world, released copies to various media outlets and streamers and whatever, with embargoes set upon them. Some people got very vague embargo, so when things happened, all of a sudden they had to go, well, you can't stream that. We know we specifically said you've got to get up to this boss, But of course, if you don't know what's coming after that boss, if you go a way that they don't intend you to go, in terms of exploring and then find another boss instead, it gets a bit awkward. Either way, it then came up that if you set your Xbox region to Japan, change the PayPal or whatever to Japanese yen, put money in it, buy the Japanese version of Dark Souls 3, but then switch your console while in the process of downloading. If you pause the download, change the region back to wherever you are in the Western world, and then continue the download, you actually download the international version with the English subtitles, with the English text and descriptions, with, well, it's English dialogue for all versions anyway, but yeah. And of course, if people did that method, they're not under embargo. And the thing is, this is Dark Souls. This is a franchise where it's supposed to be, you know, it's a big one for fans. You know, the Dark Souls fan base is a very passionate fan base. That's how I'll appropriately put it. They're passionate. So if they've got any opportunity to play it early, they will. Bandai Namco kept stressing it's not the finished game, it's all going to get patched come day one. Which is interesting that they didn't do it from launch. Because the game is out. The only reason it isn't coming out here in the Western world until like April is because of good old tax reasons and financials. Basically, they want their Bandai Namco want their Q2, or well, Q2 as in April to June for us, but for them it's actually their Q4, so it's their final quarter before they report, you know, before they do their annual sort of review. They want obviously a strong final quarter, so that's why they've done it in April, so that all the sales in the Western world will be in that quarter. Because obviously in Japan, I think it's actually From Software that are doing it themselves. I'm not sure. You know, Bandai Namco, Namco Bandai, whatever. I can't even remember what they're actually called again. I think it's Bandai Namco. The Western release, they want to just be in that final quarter. But the thing is, people are going to be curious. So all of a sudden, you've got some people angry that they have now got this embargo on them. There's some people that actually had the embargoed version, then went out and got the version officially, and literally Bandai Namco said there's nothing we can do about it, because apparently there's been quite a few Xbox games. Because admittedly Dark Souls 3 is also out on PS4 and PC, but with Xbox, if a version of a game comes out internationally, this trick to actually get it has worked previous times. You know, when games have come out early in other regions, ahead of when they come out either in the US or UK or whatever, if you just switch it to that region, you're able to download it digitally. First and free and all that. So that's sort of Microsoft's fault, but the fact that they still want the embargo to be put in place, when already out there on the internet, for those people that are interested in the lore, the final boss and the story and everything is pretty much done on a platter. People have already done the equivalent. You know, they've explored everything. They've data mined. Well, I say data mined, but what I actually mean is they just fully explored it. You know, to get the full-on sort of experience. And I honestly think when we get to the official release of Dark Souls, the interest will be obviously less because people will have already seen it 3 weeks before. You'd have thought at this point they would have done what most people do when things happen and there's glitches or reports and stuff. They just drop everything. If you remember a few months back, a trailer got leaked early for Lego Star Wars The Force Awakens. And because of that, the Warner Brothers and that decided to just release it officially just a day early than they were going to. I think there was a similar thing with Lego Dimensions, and basically sometimes when embargoes are broken accidentally, there's leaks or whatever, the best way to obviously cover it up is to just bring the actual official thing forward. Obviously, they don't think that at Bandai Namco. You know, regardless of the patch, most people are going to be interested in the story, yet alone the gameplay. I can understand why they want the game to be patched, because apparently a lot of people have been saying when they've been playing the game, the experience has been a lot easier. So I guess the patch will basically have a difficulty thing. So it's impossible, because some people have been trying New Game Plus on the Japanese/international version. Because I have to say Japanese because that's what they bought, and then via some glitch they get the international version. The New Game Plus in this international version, at the minute, when you get to bosses, you can one-hit them. So yeah. The thing is, if they're giving it... because they're only allowed to show footage at the minute of the game up to like a third of the way through. Privately, they can play it all to completion and go through New Game Plus to get an idea of what's to come. And at the minute, with New Game Plus, that's a bit of a joke. So, yeah. It's all going well. Really well. I will say it is annoying that I've had to get this video in for today, because literally at the same time that I'm recording and doing the podcast, there is a big giant event for Final Fantasy 15, and by the rumours of it, Final Fantasy 15 is coming out at some point this year. It's probably going to be announced tonight. So that might be what I talk about next week. It probably won't be, because I'll be knackered from WrestleMania. Well, actually, I could go a bit different. Nah, I was going to say cover the Counter-Strike Championship that's going on now. But then again, I just get bashed in the comments. What to cover? We'll have to see. You'll have to see. Why is this video still going? It's because I can't be bothered to press the stop button, I guess. At least this time I can't bloody put a sausage in my mouth and look like a complete idiot. And if you think that's a euphemism, you sick bastards.